Hello everyone. I'm going to go through slides and switch into a fireside chat moment with my colleague Lena. To give some context, I used to do things like this. I used to design things by computer programs in the 90s. Not sure if you know Morita, but it's a type company. And I would make complex things like this. In the 90s, it was very hard to make. Now it's actually quite easy. And I designed for different clients like Chanel, Absolute, and things like this. We're in the 90s. That's 20 years ago. Kind of embarrassed. But before that, like 40 years ago, I grew up in a tofu store in Seattle. You all know what tofu is here, so that's easy. But it was this kind of place that was a little dirty and dangerous. Probably if there was a sanitation grade, it would be a C. But the tofu was, of course, delicious. And this was my life. It was in a small factory, working with my family. It was always cold. Inside this vat over here is cold water. So in winter, we were always very cold. We were always touching cold things. We also made aburage, which is always fried. So it's either freezing or searing hot. And there was always heavy things. So we're always pressing, tofu is all about pressing things like making cheese. But because of it, like my father, who's 80, he can't stand up straight because he had to lift so many things. But by watching my parents and working with my parents, it was transformative. And because work was so hard, my parents wanted us to go to college because they didn't go to college. And they knew of two colleges, MIT or Harvard. And so it was their dream, and somehow that dream manifested. I went to MIT, etc. Very lucky. But what I realized that a lot of it was my parents taught me this was how I grew up. I watched Yakuza movies and Chambara movies as a child. Probably not good to show little kids rated R or rated X things, but that's how I grew up, and those were my heroes. And I've been thinking today about the technology world, but also thinking about the Japanese world. There's a lot of strong role models for men in the entertainment industry, and I was exposed to all of them. Again, my father's favorites were Ken-san, and my mom loved Tsuruta Koji. Another example would be this example. Everyone knows Kozure Okami, right? You know it? If you don't know it, it's amazing. He's like Batman because he has all this technology. So let me give you a clip I found. You must die too. I mean, this is like total Batman, right? So this is kind of this myth of this Japanese male role model dying in the battlefield. I think that was useful for me growing up. But when I think about my role model, it's always been this person. You know, Tora-san? And Tora-san is the most amazing character because he has so much conflict in him. For instance, this is where he's trying to let the old man sit down. And the old man he's trying to get this kid to get out of the seat. He's like, come on, let the old man sit down. And of course, he says, go ahead. Oji-san, please sit down. And then he says, I'm not an Oji-san. I'm not old. And he's getting a fight. He's like, oh, no, but you have to sit down. And like, no, wait, you're not going to sit down? And now he starts to beat up the old man. But this is a perfect example to me, I thought, an interesting role model, someone who was a bit twisted. Now, because I went to MIT and I went to art school, I was always confused about what to become. And so a lot of my work when I was president of Rollins School of Design was to combine STEM education with art education. So I advocated for STEAM education for quite a while when I was running Rhode Island School of Design. And I was involved in lobbying to change legislation in the United States to bring art to STEM education. And that was a passion of mine. But nowadays, my passions have changed. I'm now working in a late-stage technology startup, Prior to that, I spent 3 years working in venture capital at Kleiner Perkins. But my passion right now at Automattic is to understand how to make technology more inclusive. And I realize that it's not easy to talk about these things because I'm a man. And I've had privilege to be able to do things that others may not have had. So that's why I want to bring aboard Lena. Come on up, Lena. Please welcome Lena. So, I just met Lena a month ago.
Yes.
And we were at our all-company meeting. Our company is all remote, all distributed. It's 700 people across 60 countries with no headquarters. And therefore, it has a different kind of paradigm. And so we were at our once-a-year, week-long meetup, and I got to meet Lena. And Lena is a software developer. Who knows what a software developer is? Raise your hand. Okay, some of you don't know that. This is a problem. Okay, so Lena, what is a software developer?
Well, we develop software.
Exactly, right? Tofu maker makes tofu. But it involves programming.
Yes.
Now, why is it that programming is difficult?
Why is it difficult? Well, some people say that it takes a certain kind, well, it takes grit. Mm-hmm. And not everybody has that. Mm-hmm. And it takes skill to reason, you know, and stay with it while things are like breaking all over you, and you have to stay with it, keep calm, and then find a way to fix it. Because, you know, in other fields, like, you can be really bad at something, but still complete something, you know? Like, you can complete a project and be bad at it. But in software, it either runs or it doesn't run, which is a big difference. It can be good or bad, but there's a step before that where it runs or doesn't run.
It's very Kibishi.
Yes.
And who here has something called a smartphone? A phone? There we have more people who have phones here now. If you have a phone, it cannot work unless there is software. So software is the modern craft of today. If you love a shokunin person, that is the modern craft. But this craft is heavily biased towards men making the software. Have you noticed this?
Is that true? I've never seen that.
So you run Girls Who Code, Women Who Code. And can you talk about that?
Yes, Women Who Code is a global nonprofit that our mission is to inspire women to excel in technology careers. And people say that there's a pipeline problem, you know, there are not enough women going into the field. But there's another big problem in that the pipeline leads to a sewage system. There are a lot of women dropping off mid-career, like at alarmingly high rates. So there's two problems. Well, one, maybe there are fewer women going in, but then the drop-off is really scary.
Did you hear that? Pipeline to a sewage system. Now, as a software developer, I was struck by how you were sharing with me your experience of making your way into that world and having, can you talk about that moment where you realized the kind of stress that you've endured?
Oh, the stress as a woman?
Yes.
Well, you know, I go to these tech conferences, tech events, or like read hiring interviews or like just interviews in a lot of media, like blogs, and all of them are men. All of them on stage are men. There are so many all-men panels, and I'm scared because in Japan, we're still not acknowledging that it's a problem. No one bats an eye. That's really alarming to me.
Have you visited, just type in, congratulations, you have an all-male panel. It's an incredible website. It's a great website. It's this Finnish group. It's disturbing and amazing. But so you noticed that there were a lot of speakers who were men.
Yes.
When did you notice this?
Well, like the first event I went to, I remember it was for young web developers. And I went because one of my colleagues, a female colleague, was one of the staff members, and she invited me, and I went, and there were like 60, 70 people, and like 2 women. And this is really, why is this happening? Because I know that there are more female developers than 2 out of 60, but they're not included in these kind of events. They don't feel welcome. So they're not coming, and they're not showing up, they're not going on stage, they're not being invited to speak on panels. And so we get this problem where there are fewer women to begin with, and then they are even represented at a lesser rate.
Well, like I have been in the technology industry for quite a while, and it really wasn't until 5 years ago that I began focusing on the inclusion matter, because I began realizing that I'm a guy, and there's a lot of them all over the place. And it would feel much less inclusive. But that wasn't the only reason why. I noticed that the quality wasn't very good. And I discovered that every time I was able to create a panel or a conference that was 50% women and men, the panel was just better. The discourse was better. So I'm passionate about that. But to meet you as a Japanese person, and I've been studying, since I've read in Japan, how bad it is here, not good. Not good, not good.
Oh, cool.
And I know that you, with your organization, are trying to make that change. But you pointed out how English is a barrier as well. Can you talk about that?
This is really true, because when I talk to English-speaking people versus only Japanese-speaking people, I feel like Japanese people are less informed about the issues. And so they still believe that tech is meritocratic. And so they see these places with all men, and they feel like that's the natural result of meritocracy. And there's a lot of studies on like implicit bias and how we can tackle these issues, but they're mostly in English, and they're really good quality. And I think like American people are more primed to this kind of knowledge, and so we can start from a baseline of all these premises being shared. But Japanese people still aren't aware of these issues.
You made me realize you have women who code. I bet you don't have girls who code here too. Because in the United States, there's so much work being done or attempted to be done at all age groups. But just coming here, I realized how the gap is so great. So what can we do about that? I'm sure we have people here who can change how that's happening. What do you want them to do? Be the boss. Tell them what to do.
Please. One, people of the media, or people who can share, who are credible and can share messages. I would like you to share these well-documented facts about bias and how inclusion makes things better for everyone, not just for women, all sorts of people. Yeah. And 2, please make people feel that having all-male panels, all-male speakers at conferences, make people feel that that's ridiculous. Please mock them, ridicule them, point it out.
Good.
We need to feel embarrassed about it. It's not something we should flaunt.
Yes. Yes. And so maybe if you're like a male and you didn't realize that all panels are male, it's great. It's exciting once you realize, like, oh my gosh, it's like all the time. Once you realize it, I have one pro tip. If you're ever invited to be on a panel and you notice you're on an all-male panel, you can say, I don't want to be on an all-male panel, and they'll either say goodbye to you or they'll change the panel. So just a pro tip. So thank you for that request to all of them. By the way, I know that, when I was telling Lena that I'm going to be talking with all of you, and I invited her to speak with all of you, of course her reaction was, what? But then, yes, I want to do that. So to me, Lena is an example of a young Japanese leader that I like for all of you to know is out there, because she is an example of a STEM person who is also an art person. She began as a designer, but there were obstacles for her to become a developer. Can you talk about that? That's really interesting.
Well, Well, they talk about the confidence gap, you know. Women tend to be, they tend to underestimate their competency. And so, of course, that was probably a factor. But after I started coding, I was doing it for fun for like 7 years before I worked up the courage to actually change my career. And that was 2 years ago. And look where I am now. So it's an amazing field.
7 years. Think about it. You're doing something for 7 years and you don't think you're good enough to talk about it. Kind of like not great, right? I was just telling Lena, I know so many guys who would have no problem after doing something for 7 months and talking about it. So just for context here, all right, context here. I know that there are some people in this room who are working with middle school-aged young Japanese women. And what would you like them to do, knowing what you know now?
I mean, well, one, I would like to stress the importance of embracing English as a very important language to learn. Because a lot of people, I think, are actually competent enough in English, but they kind of feel that they're just scared, you know? They're scared to make mistakes. But I would like to encourage them to meet more people from the world for whom English is a second language, and to know that it's okay. You don't have to be perfect to start speaking. And then after you learn English, it's so much easier to learn the tech stuff.
How many of you have like daughters in your family or granddaughters? Can you raise your hands? I'm sure you have a few. There's a few out there. So I just want you all to tell them that there is Lena out there, and there's other women in Japan who are working to be visible and seen because the software quality in Japan is not good enough, and it has to improve. So to improve the quality of products, to improve the quality of how much a company can make money, I believe it's pivotal to be able to access this incredible talent pool. And I feel lucky at Automattic that I get to work with Lena. So, thank you, Lena. Appreciate that. Please, Lena.